Chiefs 27, Jaguars 20. There's your backdoor cover because they kicked the late field goal because Chris called down from the booth and said, kick the field goal. Screwed our picks. Yeah, 27-20. Of course, the big story here, Patrick Mahomes with a high ankle sprain, the turn-in ankle sprain. First off, Mahomes was just unbelievable early on.
Yeah.
It felt like he didn't make a pass with 2 feet on the ground anyway. Everything was on the move and finding dudes and getting open and all. It was incredible. And then he gets hit, gets rolled up on completely legally, by the way. Comes out of the game, could barely even walk. He tried to, run a few more plays, couldn't even make a stretch handoff. He's hobbling on one leg. Chad Henne comes in, and it's like, oh boy, Chad Henne's coming in for the next drive, and it's starting at the 2-yard line. Good luck, Chad. Go get him. Which, by the way, 15-year veteran Chad Henne, that one hit hard, didn't it? Chad Henne's been in the league for 15 years. 15 years.
Well, but also he's been in the league that long. Also, his sort of 1 year as a starter, right, was 2013. So he was the sort of first post-Blaine Gabbert failure guy where it's we've had enough of Gabbert.
Yeah.
Sit your ass down. You're done.
He was the bridge quarterback between Blaine Gabbert and Blake Bortles.
So it's finally Blaine Gabbert just played his way to the bench. And they were like, look, sit the hell down. I'm fed up with this. Chad, get your crap, get out there, see what you can do. And then after Chad had a shot, it was like, God, now we're in position to draft the next guy, Blake Bortles. Then somehow Blake takes him to the AFC title game. And then that, falls apart. But it's just phenomenal that Blaine Gabbert's been in the league that long. And then Chad Henne has been in the league that long as primarily a backup, in addition to that 1 year where he basically replaced Gabbert.
Henne has seen a lot of failed Jags quarterbacks along the way here. So he comes in and engineers a 98-yard drive. Mm-hmm. I mean, kind of, sort of. There's a 15-yard roughing the passer or whatever it was.
That's engineering.
It was engineering. There was a 39-yard run by Isaiah Pacheco. I have to say, the Chiefs stepped up without Mahomes, because when Mahomes came back in, Mahomes comes back in the second half, and my thought was they didn't put him in right away because they did have to go get X-rays, right? Make sure it's not broken. And I thought they didn't end up putting him right back in because they didn't want to put him in mid-drive, first of all. And then second, I did wonder if they were giving him an injection, right? You get a little painkiller or whatever you would get. Does that take time to set in? Whatever it might be, right? So I thought it was reasonable that he might come back in the second half, and he did. Clearly not the same. Could barely walk. Certainly couldn't run, but he could move just enough in the pocket on one leg to just make spectacular throws. He missed a bunch of throws that he would normally make, but in the red zone when he needed to make a play, all that stuff was great. But man, to me, it felt like, from two perspectives, the Jags missed a golden opportunity to just, win a couple pass rushes, and Mahomes is contained, right? The most frustrating Mahomes plays are when he breaks contain. He didn't even have to break contain. The Jags didn't win any pass rushes ever. And then the Chiefs' offensive line, from their perspective, I tweeted out the picture of the pocket Mahomes had. It looked like, old school Big 12 game where there's not anybody within 10 yards of him, because I thought the Chiefs' O-line just stepped up and said, all right, we're going to protect him. And to me, that was the story of the game. The Jags had opportunities with an injured one-legged Mahomes to make plays, and they couldn't do it. And the Chiefs around Mahomes, Mahomes played all right too on one leg, but the Chiefs around him, running the ball, pass protection, they all played pretty well.
Yeah, it was such a fascinating game because of when the injury happened and sort of the dynamic around it. So you get basically an almost flawless Patrick Mahomes for the first quarter. He was just looking incredible, making any kind of play. Starts off with a veer option, mobile athletic play. Then he has a legit jump pass from the pocket where he's contorted in midair, no feet are on the ground, still puts the ball exactly where it's supposed to go. Mahomes to Kelsey was just stealing the way it is all the time. And then all of a sudden, his ankle gets rolled up on bad. And you're like, uh-oh, that could be it. And then you get almost like a decent chunk of Chad Henne. He played basically the whole second quarter, right? So you get this
which was that long drive and then the kneel. So you get maybe another drive in there too? Sorry.
I think so. So you get this decent chunk of Chad Henne, and then you get Mahomes comes out for the second half, and obviously a completely different guy than he was in the first quarter because now he basically can't move. Or not just can't move, but So you sort of think, look, if there's one quarterback in the NFL that doesn't really matter, that he now has 1 foot, because it's not like he throws off his feet most of the time anyway. He's got ridiculous mechanics that, I was tweeting earlier in the game that imagine being a coach teaching kids, how to play quarterback, like fundamentals, and then them watching Mahomes and everything he's doing. And you come in, you're like, oh, like, forget everything you just saw. Like, don't ever try any of that. It's ridiculous. So he does that anyway. But the problem is when he's doing that, he's doing it from a position of like knowing when he's not going to have that foot or not. When you have the bad leg, it's the plays where you're not really thinking about it until you try and do something on it, and then it's just not there. That's when it causes problems. Like he missed one just sort of routine pass out to the right somewhere where it wasn't sort of a weird platform or anything, but it was when he put his foot in the ground, you could see it like instantly, like the nerves fire. Like it hit the pain, it fired up his body, and all of a sudden that like changed everything.
Right. It wasn't the push off. It was the fact that you don't realize the force that goes through your legs just to make a throw.
And it was
until
just
like
his
mid-throw, it just
his foot came down, connected with the ground. You could like basically see the synapses through his body fire, and it just tweaked everything on the right-hand side of his body, and all of a sudden the pass is a yard off. That was where it was causing problems. But it presented this sort of fascinating dilemma for Jacksonville's defense. Like, what do you do to attack Mahomes now? Because generally, you don't want to blitz Mahomes because he will carve you up. Like it's the one thing you don't do to him. Weirdly, they actually blitzed him quite a lot in the first quarter, and he was carving them up.
Right.
But all of a sudden, now you've got this guy that can't really move. So does that change what you do? Do you go after him now because he can't get away? Or do you say, well, theoretically, he still knows how to carve up the blitz, so let's just stay back and not do anything? And he was blitzed the same number of times in the second half combined as he was in the first quarter. I feel like you probably wanted to go in the other direction and say, let's make him make those plays now because he's stuck back there. So let's get after him. He can't get out anymore. So we're going to have to force him to make those plays quickly and immediately and now.
For a couple of reasons, right? Because he's not mobile enough, right? He has, and then because does he even have enough power to drive the ball down the field?
Right.
Right. So it's like, all right, we're going to assume hit the ball, hit the throw over the top. Now, like a touch pass is probably easier to throw when you don't have your leg than anything you have to zip in there. So if you're going to leave like a go ball on the table, that's risky. But that's not even Mahomes' game. Like think about as great as Mahomes is, how many times does he hit an in rhythm, just straight go ball to his receivers? Like twice a year. He really doesn't do that all that often. So that's where I think the blitz and make him get rid of it. And then if you can just take away a first read, you have an opportunity there. But so I think from both perspectives, right? The Chiefs' offensive line was fantastic. Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, and Joe Thuney, the center and two guards, combined to allow one pressure between the three of them. Unbelievable. And it wasn't just, like, we view pass rush a lot of times as like a binary, did you win, did you lose? It was also like the Jags weren't getting close most of the time unless they blitzed. Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen, Roy Robertson Harrison, nothing. They did nothing. And that's a pass rush that, Arden Key, those guys have had games where they're kind of clicking and, they get 4 or 5 pressures apiece and it looks decent. This was bad. I mean, the Jags lost it in the trenches. The Chiefs won it, I think, in the trenches. Then you add the Andy Reid factor. Chad Henney's got a wide open touchdown to Travis Kelce. I got to preface this every single time, right? Mahomes, awesome, but we've seen when Mahomes has gotten hurt, we saw Matt Moore in 2019 when they won the Super Bowl come in for 2 games, and his passer rating was like 102 or whatever. They have offense. They create offense, right? Andy Reid has always created offense. Then you get him a superhuman quarterback, and now it's one of the best offenses of all time, right? I mean, that's where we are. So even though Chad Henney's a 15-year veteran and he's a backup and he threw for 26 yards or whatever, they find a way to create offense. Then you have plays like Travis Kelce getting targeted, 17 times, 14 catches for 98 yards. I know it's all underneath stuff, but 2 short touchdowns. And there are plays where he's got Arden Key and Josh Allen. He's got the edge defenders covering him. To me, it just felt like missed opportunities for the Jags where they could say, attack Mahomes, take Kelce away. All right, now what? All right, beat us, 15, 20 yards down the field. Let's go. And Jags couldn't do it. And the Chiefs did. I mean, they did a great job I think the rest of the team stepping up with Mahomes on one leg.
Yeah, the other thing that was really interesting is I think it was right after Mahomes was back in the game, the Jags defense dropped an interception off a batted pass that Olakun dropped it. If Olakun took it away from Tyson Campbell, who was about to break in front of the receiver and would have taken it himself, and I think if he'd caught it, would have housed it. Like there wasn't anything in front of him if he'd managed to catch it and keep running. So that dropped interception is probably a 7-point play for Jacksonville that they didn't get. That's the kind of play where, all right, you've just been handed this lifeline, right? You're in trouble against Kansas City. All of a sudden, Mahomes is injured. The whole game is taken on a different complexion. And now he's back in the game, one-legged, and he just hands you 7 points. And it wasn't even like, it was off a batted pass. It's not like it was an egregious mistake.
Not Mahomes' fault necessarily, right. But it's still like the ball.
But it's like this is the kind of lucky break, if you like, that you need on defense if you're going to take advantage of a team like the Chiefs. And they dropped it. They couldn't make that play. Like that is a potential. I mean, ultimately it ended up obviously being a 7-point difference,
right?
Because they covered with that field goal. But like that would have been a huge play in this game.
And when they played in the regular season, the Jags actually got those breaks, right? I think Mahomes threw him one interception. They had the fumble on the kickoff return. The Jags got those breaks just to be within 10
right.
against a healthy Chiefs team.
Then, like the flip side of that is they weren't quite making the plays that they made last week, right? When the comeback against the Chargers, every time Trevor Lawrence dials it up, he hit something big or he made a big play, right? This time, I think didn't he audible again when he took that shot to Kirk, the miss?
I don't remember pre-snap what it was. That was a beautiful throw.
I think he audibled into that again and took the deep shot to Christian Kirk, and Kirk couldn't come up with it. It's like, again, those are the play. Like you can't. Those are such high leverage plays that if you leave those on the table, you're just passing up such a huge chance to win the game.
Yeah, that was for Lawrence. He was pretty effective early on. I thought they had Karlaftis covering Christian Kirk coming out of the backfield. That was a well schemed up pass, the first touchdown by the Jags. That was a good answer, man. Yeah. Like the Chiefs went down and they drive down, they get the 7. It looked a lot like what the Eagles did later that day. It looked a lot like just a lot of the games where just the favorite goes down and it's like, we're the better team, right? But the Jags answered, right? And there was a well schemed up play to Christian Kirk.
And they did. They did a good job of this. And they had several of these plays where if one of them goes their way, we're maybe talking about a different game, whether it's the dropped interception, whether it's Christian Kirk coming up with that bomb. Agnew almost answered a touchdown with a kick return touchdown and got tackled by the kicker.
Yeah.
And not really, like got tackled by the kicker by like clipping the kicker's face with his heel after he left him in the dust, like that's the difference between them scoring or not.
Yeah, it is one of those games, even with Mahomes hurt as the underdog, you need those plays to go your way.
Or at least one of them.
At least one of them, absolutely. So Lawrence hits Christian Kirk on a beautiful deep ball in the first half. Kirk drops it. That would have flipped the field right before the half, a little bit before the half. I thought Lawrence played well overall. He had to force a couple late when they were down, ends up getting picked. I also thought the Chiefs defense played pretty well. We're talking about the opportunities for the Jags, but coverage unit across the board, we knew they were going to play a lot of man coverage. We knew they were going to press and make the windows tight, and they did. I thought they played just a good solid game back and forth. I thought it was a good clean game back and forth. And even though there are times where it feels like the Chiefs are just Mahomes and friends, and that he carries the squad, right? This was a good all-around effort. The Chiefs don't have a bad roster by any means. Part of the strategy of trading Tyreek Hill was to add depth across the board, right? And that's what they've done in the last couple of years. I've disagreed with the Tyreek Hill move. It still might come back to bite next week. Who knows? Not having that big play of Tyreek Hill. But the Chiefs have done a better job of making the defense a tick better, the offensive line better. The receivers are still solid. They're good enough across the board. And then Mahomes, carries them and makes them elite.
I don't act like, Mahomes getting hurt made them better, because it obviously didn't. But it felt like when they were sort of forced into this mode of, all right, how do we protect? How does the offense change with Mahomes now one-legged? And they started to run the ball a bit more. And all of a sudden, you're sort of reminded that they have maybe the best run-blocking offensive line in the NFL. Like, this is potentially something that you should tap into more generally. Like even when everybody's healthy and the offense is cooking, like maybe we should lean into the fact that these guys can just maul opposing defenses a bit. Like they started running the ball with Isaiah Pacheco and doing like they were opening up some big holes because like Creed Humphrey is a very similar player and profile to Jason Kelce stylistically, but he outweighs him by like 40, 50 pounds. Like, he's huge.
Creed is a big center.
Right.
But with Kelce like skills up front for sure.
Yeah. So when you've got these guys up front that can move like that, I mean, it feels like that's a thing you should use a lot.
I think the Pacheco addition too, I've said this before too, it just adds a different type of player that you need to tackle, right? I mean, when you're preparing for this offense, it starts with Mahomes and you got to beat him. He's in the pocket, he's out of the pocket. You got to figure out Kelce. And then, oh, by the way, there's a power runner with speed in the backfield in Pacheco. And then you add the Jerick McKinnon and Kadarius Toney aspect, right?
Toney, by the way, who's running like Pacheco.
Unbelievably hard, right? And there were plays, I was half joking when I said, hey, McKinnon and Toney are like Debo and McCaffrey, right? Here's a run. But there were some plays where you'd see Toney in the backfield and McKinnon split out wide, right? You're interchanging receivers and running backs. And it's like those little edges that just add up. And Toney is a guy who's got some of the shiftiest plays you'll ever see. And all of a sudden he's running with power too, like he's Percy Harvin. I never thought he had that type of strength as a runner. And like, we've done overrating like 36 yards from Kadarius Toney, but all those little things are adding up for the Chiefs because it makes life difficult on opposing offenses when they're trying to account for all these weapons.
I mean, Toney is a pretty big guy. Like, I think what he's sort of doing is tapping into that for the first time. Like throughout his career before, he's been like, well, I move like a freak. I'm going to try and avoid, hits as much as possible. Now he's like, I'm 6 foot, 200 pounds. If I lower the shoulder, it's not going to be fun for you. Like, let's tap into that as well as the movement skills.
So just from like a high level perspective, I think, hey, good year from the Jags, right? They were 3-7, maybe 3-8, right? They were 3-7 at one point. Completely turn this thing around, make a playoff run, make it to the divisional round. They're not as good as the Chiefs, even with the injury to Mahomes. They certainly have something to build upon. I thought Trevor Lawrence looked good during the playoff run after the slow start against the Chargers. There was definitely times we talk about what was missing this year that came back to bite. I do think the true number one for Jacksonville when you need it to, who's that one guy to step up. Look, Christian Kirk had really good production, but I thought the Jags, it was a combination of Kirk's got a good skill set, speed and quicks and everything, but they did so much to get him into space, to scheme him open and everything, much like the wheel route. Get the Jags that one wide receiver one that Trevor Lawrence can be aggressive with and just win when they need to.
Will they become fascinating next year? Because remember, they traded for Calvin Ridley, right? With his suspension for the single game parlays. So potentially Calvin Ridley is ready to step into this offense. They're also, I mean, as much as they probably weren't as bad as they looked last year, it was just the Urban Meyer effect. I don't know if they were quite ready for where they are this year. They still have enough holes on the roster that, they I think were right to get beaten by a team like Kansas City and not be playing in championship weekend. But like, if they can add a couple playmakers here or there, and not just at receiver, but like across the roster, now you could be talking about something fun.
Yeah, for sure. Even like Travis Etienne, he ran really hard. He's breaking tackles.
He was getting a lot of joy in this game.
He had a good game, man. And I thought, not that you want to run him 5 or 10 more times, but he finishes with 10 carries for 62. They were effective running Etienne. So I thought that was excellent. So now the big story, of course, is going to be Mahomes and his health, right? Mm-hmm. So you made it through the game. This is not an injury that disappears in a week normally. Right. It did look bad. It was bad. It doesn't disappear in a week. There's going to be some kind of mobility issues. Oh, the one other point I wanted to make. I think the Chiefs' offensive line deserves credit for sure, but we've heard before how much easier it is for an O-line to block for a quarterback where you know where he is, right? So maybe like Brady, is always going to be at 7.5 yards and he's going to be, that's it, right? You know the landing spot. The defense does too, but you know what you're blocking for. We've heard Kirk Cousins being complimented for this, right? Guys that don't drop back too far, because it's guys who drop back too far, it changes the angles and geometry of the block. There may have been some of that actually benefiting the Chiefs. And Mahomes, if he never had to break the pocket, can still win, right? He could still win by just picking apart a defense. But I also think that you lose the special, right? You lose when it's not schemed up, when it's not there, Mahomes is going to create. So it'll be interesting next week to see. I think the Bengals are as disciplined as any team as far as pass rush lanes, and especially with Mahomes containing him and everything. that's the other thing the Jags should have thought about, right? Like, he was never going to break out of the pocket the same way that he had previously. He was not going to run left or run right. What Mahomes did was just step up way more than he normally does. He doesn't like to step up in the pocket. He doesn't do that. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bengals handle their launch point as pass rushers and what they're attacking, how much mobility Mahomes will have, and then how the Chiefs scheme it up to offset the injury going into next week.
I mean, it's also a fascinating coaching conundrum for Andy Reid. Like, because Mahomes is going to go whatever. Like, even if he was not functional whatsoever, he would go out and try. I mean, we saw it in this game, right? He went immediately right back in, and then was it a timeout or something came up and gave him enough chance to quickly get it taped. And then after they got it taped, they finally convinced him to go and get it x-rayed and check it's not broken. And then finally that presumably got him, Chad Henne does well. They've probably got enough time to be, all right, chill for a little bit, Patrick. We can figure out what we're doing here. Maybe they give him the injection. I have no idea. I haven't heard about it, but whatever. He's out for a little bit and then he goes back in. Point being, whether or not he had any business being out there, he is going to go out and give this a shot. So then it becomes an Andy Reid decision of what percentage of Mahomes is better than Chad Henne. Like if this is 60% Mahomes, he's 60% healthy, that's probably still better than Henne, right? If it's 40% Mahomes, is that still better than Henne? I don't know, maybe. Like, how much, like, how bad does he have to be before you think we probably are better with Henne? It's probably pretty bad.
Single digits.
Right. So like
9% of Mahomes.
If he can literally not even move in the pocket, like
Mahomes
he's just
with
a
1.5 limbs. It's not a knock on Henne. It really is. It's like the superstardom. It doesn't mean that Mahomes will definitely do it. It's going to be a challenge against this Bengals defense, which is much different than the Jags defense. It's going to be a challenge. But it's the superstar aspect of it. Because even in this game, it's like Mahomes is going to throw one in the dirt on a swing pass or whatever it was. Okay, the injury is a factor, clearly. But when they needed one in the red zone and he needed to get a little bit of room in the pocket and make a little jump throw on the wrong leg and all that stuff, he's going to do it, right? And so the superstar is going to rise up for a handful of plays. If he could just keep it close, you trust that the superstar in him is going to rise up for a few plays and make history. And I think that's what the Chiefs are going to be banking on next week.
Yeah, it also, potentially the game plan that you would draw up to attack a guy that is injured to the point where he can't really move is the exact opposite of the game plan that you would usually associate with defending Patrick Mahomes. So like, what is the last thing you want to do to Mahomes is attack recklessly, force him on, like make him move from the pocket and potentially then break, contain, and do something crazy out in the move, right? Whereas if he can't move, you actually want to force him to start doing that stuff. You want to send stunts and blitzes and weird things up the middle that makes him at least move to his right. And all of a sudden he realizes, oh, I can't move to my right now. I'm just sort of hobbling nowhere and I have to quickly get rid of this ball because there's somebody chasing me. Like, do you spend the week figuring out, what kind of stunts can we use? Like, what can we do to force him off his spot? Or do you say, well, hang on, what if he's like 80% healthy and this just plays into what he does well?
Well, there's two things at play here, right? Last year's Bengals had a ton of success with the three-man rush, remember? That was the big second half adjustment. It's a different year, it's a different team, it's a different scheme. The Bengals didn't use that a ton in the last matchup until a key third down, right? In the last third down that Mahomes had, they go three-man rush, they disguised it pretty well, and then they get the sack. I think the Bengals are the best at falling back and knowing where he's going to move. I think what changes is how the teams are going to pass rush, how the Bengals are going to rush him, because normally the ends are going to get upfield and you're worried about him going through past the guards, say. Like he'll escape up and out past the guards. I don't think he's going to do that, right? I don't think he can run. And if he does, you let him, right? What I think needs to change, the Chiefs are going to change the way they pass block. And those three, the center, guard, those guys are going to be stout in the middle, because this is like, it's going to be like blocking for Breeze or Brady, where they need the top of the pocket protected, or the middle of the pocket protected. And the Bengals are going to try to attack that part of the pocket where all he can do is move up pretty much. If you want to move laterally, like go for it, man. So that, to me, that's assuming the mobility is similar to what we saw yesterday. To me, that's going to be the interesting one in that matchup there. So it's still going to be fun. I see not fun here. The Tony Pollard news.
Yeah.
As he's hitting free agency. You want to touch on that?
Todd Archer tweeted that he suffered a fractured left fibula that will require surgery. Normally those require 3-month recovery. And of course, Pollard is heading into free agency off the back of the season. So
the fact that it's a break, Dr. Monson here, is that okay? You know, breaks are pretty, no surgeries routine or simple, but is that like, hey, we know what the recovery is as long as surgery goes well?
Yeah, I mean,
I expect him back next year and whatever else happens.
I wouldn't expect it being a bad thing for him going into next year, but it just sucks for him to, you know, enter free agency off a really good year, but with an injury like that. You know, a guy who I think his free agent market is already going to be very weird given his career and the whole, you know, don't pay running backs big money, second contracts kind of thing. I think he was already heading into a strange free agent period. So to be doing that with a broken leg that you're recovering from is just not great.
Interesting game happening in the chat here. Guess Dak's grade. Feel free to put in a number there. I believe it's going to be below 50.
I would hope so.
I believe it could be in the 35 to 45 range. 35, 40 could be Dak's grade.
It's in the cheeks range.
It's in the cheeks range.
Can we update the scale? Color scale? You know, blue chip elite, whatever this is, dark red, just cheeks.
40 is bad, but anything below that's just
cheeks.
So yeah, sad.